So, Andy, apparently Ace Bailey doesn't want to play for anybody in the NBA. Weird.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Monday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. That's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making this your first listener watch to get your Monday going the right way. We want to remind you, you can catch every single episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all you everydayers who are here with us and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. We'd love to see you in there chatting college basketball, all you junkies who are with us in the off season. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Andy, it's draft week. That's coming up Wednesday and Thursday. As a reminder, this will be year 2 of splitting this bad boy in half. First round is Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Second round, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And so, Andy, what we're going to do on the show today is we're going to start by discussing Ace Bailey. Apparently, he's looking to take more L's than just the preponderance of L's he took at Rutgers this year. And we're going to have some NBA draft pick superlatives coming at you in segments 2 and 3. Really excited for those. Those are always fun. And so, Andy, why don't you just kick us off by telling us what's going on, gee whiz, with this Ace Bailey stuff?
Yeah, there's always something going on pre-draft with some prospect where it's like, oh, is it an injury? Is it them canceling workouts? Is it like there's always some drama in the days leading up to the NBA draft. But this is a particularly unique one. Ace Bailey has canceled his meeting or workout with the Philadelphia 76ers, who picked number 3 in the NBA draft behind Dallas and San Antonio, who are widely expected. I mean, it's a lock. Cooper Flagg's going number 1 to Dallas, and it's pretty much a lock that Dylan Harper's going number 2. The main question is whether that's actually going to be to San Antonio or if they're going to trade the pick. But then after that, for a long time, it's been kind of consensus that Ace Bailey was the 3rd best player in this draft class, that he was going to go number 3, that Rutgers inexplicably was going to have 2 top 3 picks despite finishing well under 500 last year in the Big Ten. But now we're hearing this that Ace Bailey's not working out with Philadelphia. He, in fact, has not worked out with any teams individually. From a recent report I saw at Yahoo, he's the only U.S.-based prospect who has not had any individual team workouts since the combine, which seems kind of insane. And he's seemingly tanking his draft stock. I don't think that's the goal, obviously, because that costs you a whole bunch of money. But what we do know is that his agent is Omar Cooper, and a lot of this was reported by Jeff Goodman of the Field of 68. And Omar Cooper has been asking for money to do media appearances, which is not super relevant, but is certainly odd, not something you typically see. Cooper is also the father of Sharif Cooper, who was, some of you may remember, a player at Auburn, very, very good player at Auburn, who left Auburn too early and went into the NBA draft, was picked late second round, and is now playing professionally in France. And I think a lot of people think if he had stayed in college, that may have been a better situation for him. Nobody's saying Ace Bailey should have stayed in college, by the way, but not working out with the team picking 3rd is certainly a choice. And it kind of feels like Bailey's trying to position himself to get to a certain team. A lot of people think Brooklyn is that team, and they pick at number 8. Whether he's actually willing to basically tell teams 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to not pick him so that Brooklyn takes him at 8. Maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's the goal here. Brooklyn also has a ton of first-round picks, 8, 19, 26, and 27. It seems
sounded like the combination in Lost that Hurley says over and over.
Right. Yeah, it does sound like it does sound like the Lost combination. They have a second-round pick, too. Maybe it's 42. I feel like that was one of the Anywho, Brooklyn could conceivably package some of these picks, trade up to take Bailey a little bit higher. And maybe that's what they're hoping will happen here. But it's a weird situation. And I think, one thing about this is if he does fall to 3 to 8, that's over the course of his rookie contract, that costs him $20 million. And for Ace, that's a huge amount of money. He's going to make millions of dollars. For his agent, who only represents Ace Bailey, you're costing yourself tons and tons of money by potentially tanking the draft stock. This is all around weird situation for a player that was already there's nothing against Ace personally. He's a very affable young man and very well liked, but for a player that already had some concerns about his draft stock, his height wasn't as tall as people wanted him to be. He obviously played on a team that wasn't very good. Like, this was not the move. This is not the way to get yourself in the headlines a few days before the draft.
That's the point, Andy, is it's like, this is not a smart way to play it for anybody that could get drafted, but especially for someone who and as you said, another top 5 pick were unable to win games together. So that is already a strike against you. Yeah. And then, it's fine that he's not meeting with anybody because he had a great combine and measured really tall. Oh, wait, right? Like it's just like there's all of that. And so, Andy, it just seems like a brilliant way to ingratiate yourself to your potential employer. Right. Like if you were interviewing for a new job and you're like, I tell you what, I'm not going to meet with any of you, but one of you is going to hire me because I'm just that good a podcaster, right? And it's like, bro, no. And think long-term too, Andy. It's not just about setting a negative narrative about yourself. Now it's about when it's time for your next contract, there's going to be a sour taste in the back of GM's mouths, right? Of like, that's that ace kid. I don't know. And he's still got that representation from Cooper. I don't trust that. Right. And so it's just like, buddy, it's and you hate it. As you said, like, he seems like a good kid. It just seems like he's been fed the wrong stuff and he's gone with it. And so I hope the best for him, because that's why we're here. Because we love college basketball and we love the dudes and the young women that play it. Speaking of young women, our guy Howard Megdal, shout out for everything they got going on at the next. Anyway, that's completely beside the point. But it's just, we want it to work out for him. But this is not the way to set yourself up for success heading into your first full-time job.
Yeah, and I think for Ace too, like, I think he is a player that is kind of a unique fit for certain teams. We were talking offline. He's a player that, to me, he needs to be in a situation where he has the ball a ton and he's kind of allowed to make mistakes. And because he's a guy that you envision as like a alpha dog, like a 1A type player, or he's not, because he doesn't really have like those role player skills. Like, there are other guys in this draft that I think, like, who even in, like, Con Canipple is a good example of like a guy who's going to be in this range, who the upside for Con Canipple is it is definitely lower than the upside for Ace Bailey, but the floor is much higher because that he can fit into a role and be a system guy who hits threes. He's a movement shooter, but he's also a catch and like, he's just kind of got a role. Whereas Ace Bailey, it's like, does he fit Philly where they have Joel Embiid and then Tyrese Maxey? Like, maybe not. And I think it's fine to not feel like Philly's the right fit for him, but like, he could be a great fit in Utah where they kind of just need an alpha dog. He could be a great fit in Washington where they sort of need an alpha dog too. Maybe he's not a fit for Charlotte because they have Brandon Miller, who's kind of the same player. Maybe he's not a fit in New Orleans, but like, he could be a fit for these teams, Utah and Washington, but they're not going to trade up with Philly if they're pretty sure Philly's not going to take him. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of just curtails his whole draft situation. I do think Brooklyn's a solid fit, and I think that works, and maybe Brooklyn will move up. But if I'm Brooklyn right now, I'm not looking for what do I need to do to move up to 3. I'm thinking, what do I need to do to move up to 5? Because Philly's not going to take him and Charlotte's not going to take him. So maybe we can, make a move at 5. So it creates this huge shift in how things are going to shake out here. And I'm really interested in what is going to happen. Does Brooklyn move up to 5? What does that mean for Utah? Do they get a first round pick? Like, there's just a lot of intrigue about how this could shake out. I think Ace has a great opportunity, or is still could absolutely be a phenomenal NBA player. And if he is, and he comes in and he balls out and he develops the way he will, this will be forgotten by the majority of people. But if he doesn't, this is going to really be a cloud that hangs over him, and a move that I just don't think was a smart one right before the draft.
Well, I'll tell you what, who it's good news for? VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson and Con Canipple, who you mentioned. It's like, go ahead, buddy. And if anybody else wants to tank yourself, please do, so that we can move up. Right? Like, and so like, for them, you're like, oh, burn it down, man. Burn it down. Anyway, Andy, last point on this. Ultimately, on Wednesday night, he's going to go Wednesday night in the first round. How far does Ace Bailey fall?
I think he's going to go, I'll say 6. And I say 6 because I think Washington's a logical landing spot for him. And I also think that it's where, like, Brooklyn could trade up a few spots if they're only having to move from 8 to 6. They probably have to give up one of those first round picks, like 27. Washington can move down 2 spots, still probably get whoever their guy is at that point. So that's where I'd have him. I think Utah is probably going to go Trey Johnson. Maybe they go Jeremiah Fears, who's been rumored there. And so I think like it kind of depends what Philly does at 3, but I see him going 6 somewhere in there. I don't think he drops below 8. But I would at this point be pretty surprised if he goes 3 unless somebody trades up for that spot.
Yeah, 8 is the basement in my opinion. I'm with you there. I like that call. Woo, Ace Bailey. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And Isaac, I want to talk about not only Ace Bailey, but some of the other lottery picks in this draft, because we want to look at who are some of these guys who are projected to go in the lottery, who might end up being bust. There's not going to be 14 great players going in the lottery. It never is. So we're going to talk about who those guys might be and some guys outside the top 14 who might be future all-stars. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf out on the green, high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every sporting event more exciting. And if you're already following the action, why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned out on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right out into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it easy to feel like you're part of the action. Folks, we're talking about Ace Bailey. Let's talk about some of these FanDuel odds for where Ace Bailey is going to get selected. Right now at number 3, his odds are plus 410. That is a fall from where they were previously. At number 4, it's plus 300. Number 5, it's plus 300. And number 6, it's plus 250. It takes a big drop after that. So FanDuel's kind of got him in that 3 to 6 range, but certainly not as good of odds to go number 3 as they were a few weeks ago. And folks, if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Isaac, continuing our NBA draft preview conversation here as we are just a couple days out from the first round of the NBA draft, which, as we said, gets started Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Second round is 24 hours later. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about projected lottery picks, who we think might end up being busts at the next level, and some non-lottery picks who might end up being future all-stars. And then we'll close out the show with a couple other fun NBA draft superlative type conversations. So for the sake of argument, we picked the projected lottery. We used an article from For the Win, a USA Today site that takes an aggregate mock draft. So they just combined all these mock drafts from various different companies, smashed them all together, and got the top 14 projected lottery picks. So that would be Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, Jeremiah Fears, Canipple, Kaman Malawach, Kasparis Yakachonis, Colin Murray Boyles, Derrick Queen, Igor Demine, Carter Bryant, and then the Frenchman Noah Esenjui. I do not think I'm pronouncing that right, but that is who we have in the lottery here for USA Today's For the Win site. So Isaac, start with you. Of those 14 players, who do you think is most likely to not reach their potential to be considered a bust at the NBA level?
For me, it's Colin Murray Boyles. He of Gamecock fame. Yeah. I don't know if I would call it fame, but that's who he played for. Ultimately, Andy, the biggest reasons for me are his lack of outside shooting and his lack of positional size. And taken individually, those are concerns. But taken together, that's a toxic duet. I don't know what I would call it. Because if you're already, like, if you're an undersized big guy, but you can light it up, you can make some noise for yourself and you can make a name for yourself. Or if you can't light it up, but you're like an otherworldly rebounder despite your size because you got hips and a butt, then I can live with it. But the combo of not shooting well and being undersized gives me good pause. He is, let me say, like, obviously he's being projected where he is for good reason, right? He is a hard-nosed player. He's a smart player. He wouldn't have had the numbers he did in the SEC. He wouldn't be projected where he is without having some good things. But I got to pick somebody. And for me, it's Colin Murray Boyles because of positional lack of size and lack of shooting. What about you?
Yes, I'm going with a big for some of the same reasons as well. I think Murray Boyles is a logical pick here. I am concerned about the lack of shooting and the fact that his size and his rebounding and blocks and steals numbers were really good in college, but how does that translate to the NBA when the size is going to be more of a factor? And so again, a lot of that kind of in some ways applies to Derrick Queen, who I'm going with here, the star freshman out of Maryland last year. I really like a lot of what Derrick Queen does, but I feel like a lot of his best skills that we saw him display in college are not things that are super translatable at the next level. And I'm not saying he's like an Oscar Tshiebwe or a Drew Timme or somebody like that, where they were like elite college players, where it was just very obvious that their low post back to the basket scoring wasn't going to translate. To some extent, that is true with Derrick Queen, but he's also a very gifted passer. He's a good ball handler, things that those guys didn't really have. And I think there's a way to project him at the NBA level in kind of a not like a point forward role as much, but like a hub where you bring him up to the top of the key, you get him the ball and you let him kind of make reads and make passes from there and do that. And I think that could work if he could shoot, but the problem is he's not a good shooter. And he's scored great around the rim, but his 2-point percentage was like 55% on the year because he ended up taking a bunch of 14 to 18 foot mid-range jumpers, in part because Maryland had Julian Reese kind of operating down low. Yeah. So if you're an NBA team and you bring him in and you also have a big man down low, is he just going to be an inefficient mid-range shooter? Because if so, then the skill set of the passing and everything he can do kind of falls flat because teams are just going to sag off him and make him beat them with the jumper. So I think there's an okay floor here. I don't think he's going to be like a complete wash out of the league in 2 years type guy. But is he going to be, whatever team takes him in the top 14, if he does go in the lottery, are they going to be happy with what they get? I'm a little less concerned about that. And you may think, oh, he's young. He's a freshman. He was one of the oldest freshmen in college basketball last year. He's already 20. He's going to turn 21 2 months into his first NBA season. That's not old, but it's also not as young as you typically expect from a freshman. So again, think there's an NBA player here? Absolutely. Think he's going to return the value that he's going to go in the draft? Probably not.
Especially if he keeps traveling on game winners, Andy. Okay, we got to be quick on this because we are short on time, but let's kind of flip this. Which non-lottery pick is likely to be a future NBA All-Star? And I think, kind of the insinuation here is first rounder, right? Is what we're looking at, or somebody we think will probably be in the first round here. And so, Andy, we each have a pick. I know you just talked, but I'm setting it up, so I'm going to make you talk again, and we'll be quick on this, and then we'll keep trucking.
Yeah, I'm going with Rasheer Fleming, and it was close for me between Rasheer Fleming and Cedric Coward. And I love Cedric Coward. I love both these guys because they have very similar profiles, but they're both kind of fairly locked into being role players, which is not a bad thing. I think any team that drafts Coward or Fleming is going to be happy with what they get. But I'm going with Fleming because I think there is a little bit more potential upside for him as like a small ball 5 or a small ball 4. He's got a massive wingspan, like absolutely monstrous wingspan. He was not super highly regarded because he came out of St. Joe's, out of the A10, and there was just not a lot of there's fear that his competition level will hold him back. That was the same thing people said about Toumani Camara, who's on the Portland Trailblazers and looks like a future all-star already. I think there are enough similarities here that I could see Fleming, who shot 39% from 3, by the way, as a small ball 4 who can space the floor, hit threes, defend well, defend 3 through 5. That is, to me, a high-level role player who, in a given season, could end up being an all-star. I like him a lot. If he falls outside the top 20, whoever gets him is going to be real happy. I can promise you that.
Andy, I'm going to go with Danny Wolf from Michigan. I know there are questions about him. I know he's got to cut down on turnovers. Good night. I know he's going to shoot better at the free throw line than he did this year in Ann Arbor. But if he does, the size, good grief, the playmaking, it's so sexy to me. Now, I think it does raise the question, if he cuts down on his turnovers, does it also cut down on his playmaker, right? Like, can one stay where it's at while dropping the other? That's the question to be seen. But Andy, it was somebody, he led the Ivy League in rebounding 2 years ago. It's all right, cool. Can you do that at the Big Ten level? Well, guess what? Not only can he led the Big Ten in rebounding last year. Yeah. Oh, and guess what? He did that while playing alongside another 7-footer who's just out there to rebound and put the ball back in Vlad Golden. And so to lead one of the top couple conferences in America in rebounding while playing in a traditional 2-man front court is wild to me. And you combine that with the playmaking and other stuff. And I know he's kind of unorthodox, whatever. But not the most athletic fleet of foot guy. Oh, hello. What's your name again? Luca. Nice to meet you. Oh, hello, Joker. Nice to meet you. Know what I'm just saying? Like, it doesn't have to be Mr. Uber athlete to do it. And it's not a guarantee, right? But I'm enamored with the potential of Danny Wolf.
Yeah, there's a lot of centers that are kind of projected in that range, and most of the rest of them I feel like are kind of safe, albeit boring picks. And Danny Wolf way more fun. Like the floor for Danny Wolf is lower than it is for Kalkbrenner or Reyno or some of those other guys, but the ceiling is really high, and I think he could be a really, really fun player. And I fit matters so much for him. I'm so excited to see where he goes.
That's a good word. Also, Ryan Kalkbrenner he's going to make a really good living for himself in the NBA. Like, it's just that, speaking of floors, I feel like his is very high. All right, Andy, last year, 2 NBA players who were invited to the green room had to wait a full day before finally hearing their name called. Is that going to happen again? And if so, who? We'll answer that question, or attempt to at least, right after this. Andy, the green room has 24 total invitees for how many spots in the first round, Andy? 30?
30.
Yeah. Definitely they're all going to get picked on Wednesday night, right? No, probably not. Andy, last year, both Kyle Filipowski of Duke and Johni Furphy of Kansas both fell to the second round, still sitting there at the end of night one. It's so awkward when it happens. And as a reminder, that's the first 2 times it's happened, because last year was the first year that the draft had been split into 2 days. So who are we going to see, Andy, sitting there on night 2? Here's the list of 24. You give me your name, and then I'll give you mine. We have Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, Kaman Malawach, Jeremiah Fears, Con Canipple, Kaspers Yakachonis, Yegor Demon, Bryant. Who is that?
Carter Bryant.
Carter Bryant, good grief, from Arizona. Derrick Queen, Asa Newell, Noah Esengwe, Colin Murray Boyles, Thomas Sorber, Liam McNeely, who I always have to stop and think Liam or Isaac, because I always get them backwards. Traore, Nick Clifford, Cedric Coward, Walter Clayton Jr., and Danny Wolf. So, Andy, who's your pick to be still sitting there on Thursday?
It is hilarious that you skipped over literally just one name out of the 24 that you read, but the name that you skipped over was the one that I'm picking, which is Will Riley from Illinois.
My gosh, legitimately, how did I do that?
As I was following along, and I was like, oh, you missed Will Riley. That's funny.
Well, I think I just jinxed him even more than you're about.
Maybe it was just subconsciously you were like, he can't be, like, it's not him, so therefore. No, I actually like Will Riley as a prospect, but my reasoning here is I think he's good. I think he's not going to go in the top 20. And once you get out of the top 20 and you get into that, like, kind of, most of the teams picking in that range are contending teams that are trying to win right away. And I think we've seen, for starters, this movement where a lot of these teams are prioritizing taking older, more NBA ready players, because A, if you're trying to win right now, you don't want a developmental project when you could get somebody who can help you right away. And B, like, with the way rookie contracts work, like, developing a guy for 3 to 4 years and then not being able to pay him, or not being willing to pay him his second contract, is kind of pointless. Like, why would you do that if you could draft a guy who's 22, who you're going to get from 22 to 26 when he might be contributing? So I do think Will Riley has the ability to contribute right away. Like, I don't think he's this, like, insanely raw freshman who can't do it, but I think that the combination of him being somebody who's a little younger, he's also really skinny. He's just so small. He's like 186 pounds. I think he's just going to get bullied a little bit, especially defensively. And he's not a great shooter. He shot under 33% from 3 last year. He was 72.5% from the free throw line. I think there's the potential for Will Riley to develop into a player who is very good because he's got length, he's got size, and he's got shot making ability, but he's not that player yet. And I think I would be more comfortable if I was a team in the early second round, who is maybe, traditionally those teams tend to not be contending. They tend to be the teams who also had early picks in the lottery. And I think I'd love Will Riley if I was one of those teams. But if I'm like Boston or some of those other teams picking towards the late first round, the Clippers, things like that, I think I'd pass on Riley. So he's a guy that I think goes early second, but a guy who ends up, unfortunately, in this reality, sitting in the green room all night and not finding out where he's going to play basketball next year, which is just a bummer.
Yeah. Andy, I also am bummed out by the answer I'm about to give, but mine is Walter Clayton Jr., he of recent national champion fame. And it's so hard to separate when we see a guy going an absolute heater in March and into April, which he did, right? Famously, until I guess the national championship game was slow. But I think it's hard for college basketball fanatics like ourselves and others who watch to separate what we have seen and what NBA teams look for. And that's actually, even as I say that, it's almost in opposition to what I'm going to say about my next pick here. But, for Walter, I've literally never called him Walter.
When you said that, I thought of Jacoby Walter, who was in the draft last year, and I was like, wait, no, that's not who we're talking about.
For old Walt, cooking up his blue meth, Andy. Heisenberg. I'm going to start calling Walter Clayton Heisenberg and see if people can figure it out.
There you go.
Like what we're looking at versus what draft folks are looking at is often different. I know his college numbers are phenomenal. We'll see how his size and stuff, like, can his game overcome the 6'2"ness? And I know there are guys shorter than that have done well in the NBA, but ultimately it's about, of this list, I think he's one that ultimately is going to still be sitting there on night 2.
Yeah. I like him as a late first rounder for the same reasons I like Will Riley as a second rounder, just because the team's picking around there. But I think that they are in the very similar range, and it would not shock me if Clayton fell into that second round. I think a team that takes him in the second round is going to be pretty happy, because I think he's going to be a pretty good NBA player. But he's definitely in that range for sure. Last thing that we're talking about here, Isaac, is kind of the similar topic that we had to end last segment, which is a player who's in this case, not in the first round, who's a second round projected pick, or maybe even an undrafted guy who could make an all-star game, or at least be like somebody who has a much higher, more productive NBA career than people are projecting them to do, especially in a draft that is kind of weak because of how many players ended up returning to school. So since you did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. I know you just talked, but it's your turn again. Talk to us about who you have as in the second round pick, who you think could be a future all-star.
As I said, this argument is somewhat contradictory to what I just said about Walter Clayton, but I'm going with Johni Broome for Auburn. And my reason is watch the tape. This dude just averaged a double-double in the best conference in basketball. He led the SEC in both rebounds and blocks. So sure, he's a below the rimmy kind of big. And I think people think of Johni Broome as like an undersized, but I mean, he's 6'10".
Yeah, he's
like,
not that small.
He's not that small. Andy, in 4 of his 5 collegiate years, he had the best defensive rating in his conference. The only exception was his first year at Auburn, and his defensive rating was 92.8, which is still silly. He's resilient. How many times have we seen this? Oh, like that injury, he'll be back in about 18 games, and then he's playing the next night or whatever. Great teammate, a dude that just shows up time and time and time again. Just loves basketball, loves getting out there. I don't see maybe his ceiling is not as high or possible as some other guys, but man, that floor, I trust in it a lot, and would not be shocked at all to see him have a very productive NBA career where he makes at least one all-star game. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, sometimes I think we overthink things, and I think with Johni Broome, we're overthinking it. Like, yes, I get the testing, blah, 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 the style of play, all that, but Johni Broome's a baller, and he's going to be a baller in the NBA. Is he going to be elite? I don't know, but is he going to be better than a 42nd round pick, or a 42nd overall pick, which is where he's projected? I think so. I'm also going with the guy in the SEC. I'm going with Koby Brea. Koby Brea coming out of Kentucky. The most valuable skill in the modern NBA is three-point shooting. I suppose you could argue if it's like positional flexibility, switchability, whatever. Three-point shooting is very clearly one of, if not the most valuable skill in the NBA. Nobody did it better than Koby Brea. No, and like sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I'm reading, and I'm going to pick on this player. It's not a knock on him at all, but like most mocks I see have Chaz Lanier higher, and I see Chaz Lanier, and they say, oh, he's one of the best shooters or the best shooter in college basketball. I'm like, he's not though. Koby Brea is the best shooter in college basketball, right. And he's 6'6". Like this is kind of the key stat that I think people need to hear. The list of players who are 6'6" or taller who shot 42% or higher from three on 700 plus career attempts. This is the full list. Kyle Korver, Jason Capono, Allen Houston, Dennis Scott, Sam Hauser, and Steve Novak. Most of those players were not only NBA players, but really good or very good NBA players. Allen Houston was the only kind of star out of this group, but Korver and Capono carved out like 10, 15 plus year careers as three-point shooters. Steve Novak played for a decade coming out of Marquette because he was a good shooter. That's a list of players that if I knew that I was taking a player who likely was going to finish somewhere in that group in this draft, I would take him probably in the 30s, maybe even in the 20s. And he's not projected anywhere near that by most of the mocks. And I'm like, I get it. He's older. I get it. He played at Dayton prior to playing at Kentucky. But this dude is a pure, straight up, lights out 3-point shooter who has positional size. And I think that, again, kind of going back to the Johni Broome thing, are we overthinking it? Are people too concerned about other, translatable skills? What about his defense? What about his passing? What about Jason Capono and Kyle Korver pretty much just shot a whole bunch of threes and played in the league for 15 years. I don't see why Koby Brea can't do that too.
Woo, I'm with you. Love it.
Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. I'm excited for this draft. It's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, we got the Cooper Flag and Dylan Harper, but then after that, it's kind of chaos. As we talked about early in the show, I'm really excited to see where some of these guys end up. We're going to talk more about this during the draft. We're going to talk about it after the draft. We're going to recap it. We'll keep you up to date on everything going on there. And of course, more on recruiting, more on any updates we get on the transfer portal, all that fun stuff here as we're getting into July here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until Tuesday, peace out.